Right, after spending the last half hour fixing my microphone, let's actually make a video. Fuck yeah. So, in patch 3.14, the power potions will see a change. Both potions can only be bought past level 10, and that's a tongue twister right there. As for the potion of physical might, it will cost 500 gold, and the passive will be: this consumable now increases your physical power by 30 for 3 minutes or until you are killed. Additionally, your abilities now deal an additional 15% of your physical power. As damage, I would assume. Potion of Magical Might also costs 500 gold and lasts 3 minutes, but gives you 60 magical power instead, plus 10% cooldown reduction. And additionally, if you hit an enemy with an ability, you get 3% of your mana back. This only counts for gods though. So after all the back and forth we had with the power potions on the PTS and before, and the general discussion about them, what does this mean? Let's look at the potion of physical might first. The potion costs 50 gold more, which is not really that relevant. You can obviously buy it later, and it gives you an additional 10 power over what it did before. That is not too crazy given how much later you can buy the potion. The interesting part here is probably the additional effect, which is 15% of your physical power as extra damage. Judging from what we've seen with the first iterations of this on the PTS, this 15% extra physical power might actually be true damage. I'm not completely sure. It could also be adjusted this time around and actually be physical damage. We will just assume that it's true damage for now, so we assume the maximum value possible. It doesn't really make much of a difference, as you will see in a second, but for good measure, we'll just say it's like that, and if it ends up not being like that, then you'll know that the potion is worth a little less. For the calculations I did for this, I have used Thor, and what I will do is first I have the calculations for a level 12 Thor with Warrior Tabi, Jotun's Wrath, and Brawler's Beatstick against the level 12 Agni, in terms of how much power he gets, how much DPS he has, how much unmitigated DPS he has, and then we're looking at the power potion. So between those three items, you have 110 power. That's a decent value for that level, and it's reasonable that you'll have that around that time. And in order to calculate the DPS, what I did is I put in 3 basic attacks, because you're often gonna do the basic attack cancel with Thor, and all 3 of his main abilities aside of his ultimate. So it's a basic attack, ability 1, basic attack, ability 2, basic attack, ability 3. No additional factors like Hydra's star in there or anything that could impact the values, so it's pretty straightforward damage. The raw damage here, before protections, is 1727. That's a good value, that can burst the squishy. Then you have to factor in the protections the enemy might have. With this build, which is kind of rare these days, it's a high power build, but with this build you would be able to deal 1539 damage after mitigations to the enemy Agni. So what happens if we throw in a power potion? The total power goes up to 140, as opposed to up to 130 with the previous potion that only gave 20 power. And that has an impact on the overall damage. Additionally, you get the scaling from the potion on every single ability. Now, I don't exactly know how this is absolutely correct to be calculated at this point. I assume that the damage is just added on top for the abilities, and then it depends on if it's true or physical. But if it was true, the extra damage from ability being 15% scaling per ability that you use would be 63 between the 3 abilities. 63 damage is not that much, to be honest. So looking at the total DPS here, the raw damage with the additional power from the power potion and the extra damage would be 1957. The absolute damage after mitigations would be 1751, assuming that it is true damage, otherwise it would be somewhere around 1730. So in the end, the damage difference is around 200 damage between 3 abilities and 3 basic attacks that are all empowered by the power potion. I would say that is a nice bonus. It has the potential to kill a target that you may otherwise not be able to kill, that may otherwise be able to get away with a little bit of health, and that's pretty much it. In my opinion, this is not a great change in terms of the power you have, and I feel like it would rarely be worth it. There are definitely situations where it can be worth it, but given that you will have to spend 500 gold every single time, which can really delay your build in the long run, and the power potions only last 3 minutes, I kinda don't think it's worth it in most scenarios. It's maybe worth it when you're behind and you want to, for example, defend a fire giant, and that's basically the last call to have a chance at the game. Then I could imagine multiple power potions on a team could give you a fair bit of an advantage, but in general, I don't see too many applications for this. Obviously, as the game goes on, the scaling is more helpful and it becomes more beneficial overall, but it's not ever going to be really crazy in any regard, especially since high power stacking is rarely the case these days. You rarely build Transcendence on every character, so even there, it doesn't seem all too beneficial. There are exceptions, there are gods that can probably make better use of it than others. I especially think about Loki, who just needs all the burst he can get, so for him it could be great, and you probably need maybe 1 or 2 kills to justify buying it at this point. But it's, once again, it's kind of a risky call now. It's definitely not something you would have to pick up very often or every single time that you reach that level. For the magical potion, it's a little different. While I could go through the same DPS calculations here, it doesn't really make all too much sense, because different from the potion of physical might, extra damage is not the only one the potion provides you with. The 60 magical power is obviously nice, it's relatively strong for that cheap price, it is what some full items offer you, but in the end, the other stats may actually be more valuable depending on the situation. Especially 10% cooldown reduction can have a major impact on how a fight is played out. If you get 1 extra ability, and that's a lot more extra damage than the 60 magical power could ever be. The single extra ability will have so much more damage in total over your opponent that it might give you a significant edge in that fight. Also, the mana restore is something that is really hard to put into any equation, simply because it's more about the fact that you can fight longer, or you can get that mana back at the end of a fight when you're at risk, or whatever. It's more of a situational thing that can turn a fight around, or can also not do the same thing. The most crucial part about this potion especially is the late game impact. You can easily build a heavily cooldown reduction dependent character with a little less cooldown reduction if you are certain that the game is gonna go long enough for you to get to full build, and instead invest into potions of magical might late game when you have your full build. That way you will always have that extra cooldown reduction without actually having to get it. There's also some nice synergy with the blue buff, so you could possibly even skip a secondary cooldown reduction item altogether and just get Potion of Magical Might and get the blue buff into late game, which you usually might not do, and it usually should go to your soul laner, but if you plan around this potion, then it offers some new opportunities, some new windows that weren't there yet. What stands out for me with both potions that I feel is rather problematic, or would in most situations not make me feel like I can justify buying them, is the shorter duration. The power increase compared to before is not much larger. They've got like 10 extra power on top of what they had in the previous patches, and they have those nice extra effects, but the fact that they just last for 3 minutes means they mostly just last for one particular scenario. Maybe that's exactly what they should be used for. Maybe it's to defend a fire giant or to push in a phoenix. That's where you get this potion, go in, go all in, invest everything you have, and either it works for you or it doesn't, and if it works for you, it turns the tide in your favor, and if it doesn't, then it was the risk you were running with these potions. So that might be good. At this point, I think both potions are not that strong that you should pick them up whenever you can. Just spend the money on them whenever you can and consistently run them, as it was with the previous iterations on the public test server. So overall, I would say they're in a good place. Once again, I think the Potion of Physical Might offers a little less overall. and might have to get something in addition to be a little more even with the potion of magical might. But I wouldn't want to see it buffed too much, and in the end I'm not a fan of either potion, so I really don't mind. That's my opinion on this. If you are interested in other videos discussing this kind of stuff, check out the playlist linked above about SMITE theory. Thank you guys for watching. Duke Sloth, out.